There are moments in life when the world seems quieter than it should be, as if existence itself were holding its breath in front of something we can't quite name. It's that instant when the light no longer touches the corners of the soul with the same softness, and the heart, for reasons we don't always understand, starts beating in a restless way, as if trying to warn us about storms that haven't arrived yet. Fear in those moments doesn't show up like a screaming monster. It usually comes as a discreet whisper, a cold wind passing through our memories, reminding us of old fragilities, buried insecurities, wounds we tried to forget. It speaks in a low voice, but it speaks loudly, and when it speaks like that, it seems to dominate everything around us, distorting what we see, altering what we feel, creating an emptiness where there once was peace. Fear has this ability to shape shadows that are bigger than the objects that cast them. It magnifies uncertainty, stretches the night, intensifies the darkness. Suddenly, small situations take on giant proportions. Simple challenges look like bottomless pits. Disorganized thoughts turn into mazes where we can't find an exit. The inner night becomes heavier because fear always chooses the silence of the soul to whisper its lies. It tells us we're alone. It says no one sees us, no one hears us, that everything is out of control. And when we believe it, the darkness becomes a place far too cold to walk through. But there is a truth fear tries to hide, an ancient, deep, luminous truth. There is a presence that never abandons us, even when everything seems lost. There is a light that refuses to go out, even when chaos tries to snuff out candles we haven't even lit yet. There is a gentle, soft, yet unshakable strength that walks with us when our steps are trembling. It is the presence of Jesus, who doesn't just watch from a distance, but comes down to the level of our hearts, touches our shadows with compassion, and gently reveals that darkness has never had the final word. Fear may try to convince us we've lost our direction, but Jesus is the direction. Fear may show up as a lack of meaning, but Jesus is the very meaning that sustains everything. In this beginning, before any big revelation, there is only an invitation to take a deep breath and recognize that fear is not an invincible enemy. It is simply a sign that, for a moment, we've lost our connection with something greater. And it is precisely for this reason that two simple words, words that will soon be fully revealed, have the power to realign the heart, light up the soul, and open once again the window through which hope enters. Because when fear is speaking loudly, something far deeper is trying to speak through the silence. The certainty that we are not walking through these shadows alone. And as we move forward, you'll begin to notice that underneath that tense silence, there is a hidden key, two words that, when spoken in faith, turn night into dawn. And this is only the beginning of the path we're about to walk together. Fear has always been a silent companion of humanity, walking side by side with us since ancient times, like a shadow that never fully separates from anyone who breathes. Ancient philosophers and spiritual teachers saw this very early on. For Seneca, fear was less about what actually happens and more about what we imagine might happen. He said we suffer more in imagination than in reality, because the mind, when it isn't guided by the light of discernment, creates storms that don't exist on the horizon. Epictetus, another wise voice of Stoicism, taught that it is not things themselves that disturb us, but the interpretation we give them. And in that sense, fear shows itself as a sound coming from the invisible, a restlessness that doesn't arise from the facts, but from the way the heart interprets them. Much later, Kierkegaard described fear as a fear of possibility, the dread of everything that could go wrong. To him, fear was a sort of vertigo of human freedom, a symptom of living in front of an unknown we cannot control. When we look at these reflections through a Christian lens, we see that fear, at its core, reveals something profound about our condition. We are creatures who long for absolute security, yet we live in a world where almost nothing feels guaranteed. We try to predict, control, anticipate, protect, but still there is a territory of the invisible that remains beyond our reach. It is in this space that fear grows. It sprouts precisely in the places where our eyes cannot see, where our hands cannot touch, where our understanding falls silent. Fear is born from a lack of clarity, from the absence of form, from everything wrapped in fog. Symbolically, it's the echo of a dark room we don't know, the noise of something that has not yet appeared. The Bible reminds us again and again that fear is not a stranger to the human journey. That's why the words of Jesus, "Do not be afraid," appear like a loving refrain in the Gospels, not as a harsh rebuke, but as a compassionate invitation. Jesus didn't say, "Do not be afraid," because fear would magically disappear, but because his presence would be greater than anything that frightens us. It's as if he were saying, "Fear speaks about what is missing. I speak about what remains." Many times, these words emerge in moments of fragility, to the disciples in the middle of the storm, to Mary Magdalene in the emptiness of the tomb, to people walking through the uncertainties of life. And in every scene, Jesus shows up as a light piercing the fog, revealing that the unknown is not as threatening when we walk guided by a presence that knows the whole way. Imaginary fear is perhaps the cruelest, because it hides behind thoughts that seem plausible but are, in truth, projections of our inner frailties. It's that emotional storm that forms before we even see clouds in the sky. The body reacts, the mind races, and the heart tries to protect itself from a danger that doesn't exist yet. We create scenarios, stories, painful possibilities, and in the process, we disconnect from the present moment. It's as though the soul were dragged into an uncontrollable future, while the body is stuck in the now and not knowing where to run. Real fear, on the other hand, is concrete, tangible, visible, like when there's an actual risk that demands action. But even in the face of real fear, Jesus repeated, "Do not be afraid." Because for him, peace was never about the absence of problems, but about the presence of God in the midst of the circumstances. Modern emotional psychology recognizes this division too. It talks about anxiety, repetitive thoughts, and mental patterns that shut themselves into cycles. These cycles create emotional confusion, inner fog that makes it hard to see clearly. Fear then stops being just a simple emotion and becomes a full narrative that takes over the mind. Each thought snaps into place with another like pieces of a dark puzzle, until a person starts to believe that this distorted version of the world is the only one possible. And so fear steals peace, sabotages rest, and weakens hope. It tries to cut the line that connects us to what is solid, eternal, divine. From a spiritual perspective, fear is always trying to draw us away from the presence of God. It whispers that we're alone, unprotected, without direction. But Jesus, who knows the depths of the human heart, knew that fear can only be healed when we reconnect with something greater, a presence that sustains, comforts, and illuminates. That's why he promised the Holy Spirit as Comforter. And the Holy Spirit, in his most intimate role, doesn't just console. He reorganizes inner chaos, calms the storms inside, and reshapes the soul around God's peace. It's as if the Spirit gently breathes over the shadows, dispersing the ghosts the mind creates, reminding us that we are not walking alone. When we face fear through this integrated philosophical, psychological, and spiritual perspective, we realize that it's not a monster trying to destroy us, but a sign that we need to return to the center, to meaning, to the Logos, to Jesus. He is the fixed point fear tries to erase, because as long as we're connected to meaning, to the roots of faith, to the promises of the divine, fear loses its force. It becomes just a faint noise in the distance, an echo that no longer has the power to command the heart. Fear tries to break that connection because it knows that when we walk with God, its voice loses authority. And slowly, we begin to understand, fear doesn't speak about reality. It speaks about the distance between us and the presence that gives meaning to everything. In the silence of this deep reflection, at the point where the mind begins to realize that fear is not the final truth, a small opening appears, a thin crack of light that prepares the heart for something greater. Because after understanding the nature of fear, we are finally ready to discover the two words that transform everything, the words that rescue, align, illuminate, and draw the soul closer to God when the night seems endless. There are moments in life when the human heart feels like it's walking through a trackless desert, where each step raises a fine dust of uncertainty and the horizon stretches out without offering any answers. It's in this barren inner landscape that many people realize they need more than ordinary courage. They need a presence that is greater than loneliness, deeper than fear, and brighter than the night. And it is exactly here, at the point where the heart starts to confess its exhaustion, that the two words that change everything emerge. Simple words, yet charged with spiritual strength, powerful enough to move inner shadows and spark forgotten lights. Jesus, stay. It's not a desperate plea or a scream of panic. It's a humble whisper, a calm surrender, a gentle opening of the soul that recognizes Christ's presence as more than comfort. It is direction, meaning, anchor, home. When we say these words with sincerity, something happens inside us. It's as if the rusty gears of hope begin to turn again. It's like a soft breeze, almost imperceptible, rearranging the air around us, bringing a subtle clarity. There are no fireworks, no dramatic spectacles. There is simply a quiet touch, almost sacred, that makes the soul remember it was never abandoned. Because asking Jesus to stay is not inviting him as someone who comes from outside. It is awakening the awareness that he was already there, just waiting to be seen again in the middle of the storm surrounding us. This idea becomes even deeper when we look at the Gospels, where we find scenes in which the presence of Jesus turned fear into rest. Picture, for example, the moment when he calms the storm. The water crashes violently against the boat. The wind roars as if trying to rip the sky from its place. And the disciples, men used to the sea, suddenly feel small before a force they couldn't control. Despair takes over, and the boat seems ready to sink. And yet, Jesus sleeps. Not like someone ignoring danger, but like someone who knows that chaos is not stronger than the peace that lives within him. When he rises, there is no rush, no panic, no fear. He simply looks at the storm like someone recognizing an old enemy without power. Be still, and the sea obeys. In that moment, it becomes clear. The presence of Jesus is more powerful than the wind that screams. Another deeply moving scene is Mary Magdalene in the garden right after the crucifixion. She's looking for Jesus with a broken heart, unable to make sense of the apparent absence of the only presence that had turned her pain into dignity. She weeps at the empty tomb, convinced that everything is lost, that everything is over. But Jesus comes near from behind, quietly, and calls her by name. Not with hurry, not with long explanations, but with the intimacy of someone who never stopped being close. The moment she hears her name, everything makes sense again, because the presence of Jesus restores what fear had destroyed. Mary's night becomes morning in the very instant he remains. Then there's the blind man of Jericho who, without seeing anything of the world around him, actually saw more deeply than many who had perfect eyesight. He couldn't see Jesus, but he sensed that Jesus was there, and he cried out persistently, "Son of David, have mercy on me," he shouted, even when others told him to be quiet. But Jesus doesn't ignore that humble cry. He stops, he listens, he calls, and in calling him, he shows that his presence is not distant. It is near, attentive, compassionate. When the blind man comes close, Jesus asks, "What do you want me to do for you?" And in that encounter, in the gaze the blind man couldn't see yet but could already feel in his soul, the darkness begins to lose its grip. These three scenes reveal something essential. The presence of Jesus doesn't automatically remove chaos, but it redefines its meaning. It is this presence that turned the sea into silence, morning into hope, and darkness into sight. That's why when we say Jesus and stay, we are choosing to let him remain at the center of our storms, our grief, our darkness. We're not asking him to fix everything in an instant. We're asking him to be there, because where he is, fear loses its authority. And here begins the central story that illustrates this truth in a sensory, emotional, deeply human way. It was late afternoon when Helena, a woman whose soul carried invisible scars, began to feel the familiar weight of her anxiety. The air seemed heavier than usual, as if a silent storm were about to break inside her. Helena already recognized this pattern. First came the tightness in her chest, then the shortness of breath, then the feeling that something terrible was about to happen. She tried to avoid this cycle, but it felt like her mind kept pushing her into a dark maze of thoughts with no way out. That day, however, there was something different, a deep exhaustion, a quiet desire to stop fighting the fear that visited her like an old ghost. As she walked down the narrow hallway of her home, Helena felt the walls drawing closer, as if they were trying to squeeze her chest. She leaned her back against the door and slowly slid down until she was seated on the floor. Tears came without warning, mixing with her quickened breathing. No one was there to comfort her. No hug, no warm words. Loneliness seemed to be the only witness to her internal battle. And in that moment, she believed she was about to be swallowed up by her own mind. Here comes the first micro-plot twist. In the middle of that thick darkness, Helena heard something. It wasn't a clear voice. It wasn't an external sound. It was more like a soft echo coming from somewhere between her heart and her memory. It was something she didn't immediately recognize, but couldn't ignore either. It felt like someone calling her name from within, with the same gentleness as a breeze moving through the leaves of a tree. This echo didn't form complete words, but it carried a sense of closeness, as if someone were right there beside her, even though she couldn't see him. Helena tried to stand, but her legs were shaky. She squeezed her eyes shut, trying to shield herself from the thoughts rushing in too fast. Then, almost instinctively, she placed her hand over her chest. She felt the warmth of her own palm, but she also felt something else, a light calm, like the surface of a lake at sunrise. She didn't know where it came from, but she knew it wasn't something she had manufactured. It was greater, kinder, deeper. In that brief moment, something opened inside her, and this is where the second microplot twist happened. Helena, who had always struggled to find words during her crises, whispered something for the first time without effort. It wasn't a memorized prayer, not a rehearsed phrase, not a desperate cry. It was simply the most honest whisper that had ever left her lips. Jesus, stay. The words slipped out as if they'd been stored for years, waiting for the right moment to surface. And when she spoke them, she felt an inner shift she couldn't explain. It was as if a small light had turned on in some corner of her soul, illuminating just enough for her to realize she wasn't completely alone. Her breath was still unsteady, but it began to slow. Then Helena noticed something else, another unexpected moment, the third micro-plot twist. The feeling of presence didn't fade. It grew stronger. It wasn't a physical presence, but it wasn't merely emotional either. It was spiritual. It was deep. It was as if Jesus were sitting there next to her, unhurried, without demands, simply staying. She didn't hear audible words, but she sensed a clear message. I'm here and I'm not going anywhere. And that alone was enough for the chaos inside her to lose some of its strength. As time passed, Helena kept repeating the words, Jesus, stay, Jesus, stay. And each repetition seemed to open a new crack of light. Her mind, once chaotic, began to reorganize. Her thoughts, once out of control, started to calm. The weight on her chest, once crushing, began to lighten. Not because her anxiety vanished completely, but because she now had a place to anchor her soul, the constant presence of Jesus. This moment of gentle, intimate, almost secret surrender revealed something Helena had never understood. When we say Jesus won't stay, he doesn't just remain. He reveals that he never left. He doesn't arrive. He shows himself. He doesn't come from the outside. He rises from within, where he has always been, where he has always waited, where he has always lived as a quiet light. That's why these two words are more than a request. They are a return home. And so Helena's story becomes our story. At some point, all of us walk down narrow hallways. All of us end up sitting on the floor in tears. All of us hear inner echoes we can't fully explain. And all of us, sooner or later, discover that real strength isn't in eliminating fear, but in inviting the presence that transforms fear at its root. Because the presence of Jesus doesn't remove the night, it illuminates the night. And when the night is illuminated, everything changes. There is a quiet truth that passes through centuries, philosophies, and human hearts. The presence of Jesus is not just emotional comfort, it is a philosophical force that reorganizes the very structure of the soul. The Gospels call him the Logos, a word that means much more than word in a basic sense. Logos is meaning, coherence, foundation, direction. It is the principle that sustains everything that exists and gives shape to chaos. When we say that Jesus is the Logos, we're affirming something profound. He is the divine intelligence that enlightens the mind, the harmony that stabilizes the heart, the axis that keeps existence from falling apart into pieces. And when we ask, Jesus, stay, we're not just asking for company. We're asking for meaning, structure, foundation. We're asking the center to remain at the center. Philosophically, the presence of Jesus fights the inner disorientation that rises in us when life feels pointless. Fear tries to convince us that everything is random, that we're loose pieces on a chaotic board, that we're walking with no map. But the presence of Christ reveals the opposite. There is a path, there is direction, there is a higher order holding our steps, even when we can't see it. Jesus doesn't eliminate the wind, but he teaches us how to sail in it with courage and hope. His presence gives back to the heart what fear tries to steal, the sense that life has meaning, that purpose is breathing behind every silence, every tear, every struggle. Spiritually, Jesus is light, not the kind of light that simply removes shadows, but the kind of light that reveals what the shadows have been hiding. He shines not to shame us, but to heal us. He brings clarity to show that what seemed threatening was often just a distortion seen through tired eyes. The presence of Jesus is like a slow sunrise touching the coldest surfaces of the soul, melting old fears, dissolving inner confusion, bringing warmth to what has grown rigid inside us. This light doesn't arrive with violence. It arrives with care, with humility, with the gentleness of one who understands human frailty and respects it. And that's why when he walks beside us, he doesn't force the pace, he matches it. He doesn't push or rush. He guides tenderly, step by step, like someone holding a trembling hand with care. Throughout Scripture, we see this presence described in poetic, profound ways. "I'm with you always" is not just a phrase, it is an eternal promise. "I'm the light of the world" is not just a symbol. It is a spiritual reality poured out over the soul of those who believe. "I am the way" is not just a concept. It is a living direction that reveals itself as we walk. Each of these statements is an open door, inviting us to grasp that Jesus is not far away, watching from a distance. He is close, walking beside us, holding our hearts with invisible yet intensely real hands. Sensing this presence is a process, not a one-time event. It's not always a strong impact. More often, it's a soft breath. It's noticing that anxiety begins to slow down for no obvious reason. It's catching yourself breathing more deeply after a simple prayer. It's realizing that, in the middle of chaos, a surprising peace settles in, like a gentle breeze. It's hearing the name of Jesus inside and feeling something realign. This presence is experienced in the silence of the early morning, in the rest that comes after crying, in the moment when the breath returns to its natural rhythm, in the courage that appears when we thought it was gone. And because this presence is so deep, it's natural for the heart to want to respond. One simple yet transforming way to respond is through a short guided prayer, a prayer that doesn't try to persuade God of anything, but simply makes room for Him to stay. Take a deep breath. Feel the air entering not just your lungs, but your tired soul. Let each inhale be an invitation, and each exhale a surrender. Then, in the silence between breaths, say gently, "Jesus, stay with me. Walk by my side. Warm what is cold, light what is dark, strengthen what is weak. I don't need to understand everything. I just need your presence." Remain in that moment as someone resting under a warm light that asks for no explanations. Just receive. Because in the end, the presence of Jesus is the strength that sustains, the light that heals, the meaning that reshapes, the companionship that comforts. It is the deepest anchor of the soul, and asking Him to stay is, in itself, an act of faith that transforms the heart from the inside out. There are moments when the soul doesn't need explanations, theories, or long reflections, but simply a silent return to the center. In that returning, the breath becomes a bridge, and the body, so often tense and clenched under the weight of our thoughts, finds a place where it can finally rest. Close your eyes for a moment, not to run away from the world, but to rediscover the space where God whispers within you. Feel the air entering slowly, like a gentle river touching the shore without rush, carrying with it a promise of calm. Let your shoulders lower, your jaw relax, your chest open like a flower finally finding light after days of clouds. Allow your breathing to guide you back to what is simple, deep, and true. As you inhale, imagine a soft light filling you. Not a harsh light, Max, but a tender glow, like a quiet sunrise slipping through a bedroom window on a still morning. That light symbolizes the presence of Jesus, not arriving like a lightning bolt, but like a gentle touch capable of reorganizing the heart. Let your inhale draw in peace, and your exhale carry away what weighs you down. Each breathing cycle becomes a conversation without words, a spiritual embrace crossing the space of the invisible. Notice how your body slowly starts to slow down, how your mind descends from its peaks, how your soul begins to find a rest it might not even have realized it was searching for. And as you breathe, allow yourself to repeat softly, almost like a song rising from deep within your chest, Jesus, stay. Say these words slowly, letting each syllable find its place. Feel the invitation they carry, the surrender they express, the peace they plant. With each repetition, picture Jesus staying a little closer, like someone sitting beside a person he loves deeply. Stay in that moment without hurry, breathing, receiving, trusting. Because this moment, so simple, is also profoundly sacred. There are moments in our daily walk when the heart seems to lose its balance, not because of huge tragedies, but because of small pressures that pile up in silence. Modern life, with its constant noise, with demands that never stop, with expectations pushing us in every direction, can make even the act of breathing feel difficult sometimes. And it is exactly in these simple yet deeply human moments that the two words, Jesus stay, can become a transforming spiritual practice, not as a complex ritual, but as an intimate, almost secret gesture that brings clarity back into the chaos of routine. It is the kind of prayer that doesn't require preparation, only sincerity. It doesn't ask for perfection, only presence. In the morning, before your eyes are fully open, while your body is still halfway between rest and movement, you can whisper, Jesus, stay. It's like beginning the day by reaching toward the light, asking him to remain in the steps ahead. In doing this, you're not just asking for company. You're setting the spiritual tone for the day that's beginning. It's like aligning your heart with something greater, allowing the divine presence to set the rhythm before the world tries to dictate its pace. This small practice, repeated day after day, becomes an invisible anchor that protects you from winds that haven't even begun to blow. During the day, these two words can be used whenever your mind starts to race. Maybe while you're stuck in a slow line, in the middle of a difficult conversation, or doing something simple that unexpectedly stirs old insecurities. Saying Jesus, stay silently, so no one notices, is like cracking a window open so the fresh air of the Spirit can flow into your inner space. It's a way to interrupt the stream of negative thoughts and redirect your gaze to the presence that sustains you. This short phrase becomes a gentle break that keeps anxiety from taking control when something unexpected happens. In moments of sadness, when the soul feels too heavy, this practice gains even more depth. Jesus, stay, becomes a request that blends fragility with courage. It's like placing your heart in the hands of the one who knows exactly how to hold it. When the tears come, and sometimes they come unannounced, repeating these words creates an inner space where suffering is not ignored, but also isn't faced alone. The presence of Jesus, invited so simply, becomes a quiet support that holds you until your soul can catch its breath again. And then there are the moments of joy, because even joy needs direction. Sometimes when we're happy, we run the risk of disconnecting from the source of that light. That's why it's beautiful to say, Jesus, stay in happy times too. It's acknowledging that every true joy is fuller when it is shared with him. This creates a balanced spirituality that doesn't seek Jesus only in pain, but also celebrates his presence in good days. Over time, these two words start to shape identity. They remind you that you are not defined by fear, anxiety, or the feeling of being alone. You are defined by the presence of the one who remains. Jesus, stay, becomes a reminder that you have protection, direction, and constant love, not because life is easy, but because the presence of Jesus is faithful. And so, in the quiet rhythm of everyday life, these words become a way of living, a lifestyle of faith that draws you closer to God's heart with every breath. There is something deeply comforting in understanding that, despite long nights, silent fears, and inner battles no one else sees, there is a presence that never abandons the human heart. As we reach the end of this reflection, we can see that every image, metaphor, and quiet truth points toward the same certainty. You have never been alone, and you never will be. The human journey may be full of unexpected turns, and fear may try to present itself as absolute truth, but at the center of everything, there is a Christ who stays. He doesn't walk away when the wind picks up, doesn't back off when the tears fall, doesn't leave your side when your strength feels too small. Jesus walks with you, not as a distant observer, but as the faithful friend who sustains, guides, and illuminates. He is the presence that does not change, even when everything around you does. When you say the words "Jesus, stay," something deep happens. Not because these words are some magic formula, but because they express a genuine desire for communion. They recognize that the soul needs more than explanations. It needs presence. They affirm that despite uncertainty, there is a light that never goes out. And that light is the very essence of Jesus, who illuminates your steps even when your eyes cannot see the whole path. He is the shepherd who knows your fears before you can even name them. He is the hand that reaches out before you realize you're falling. He is the gentle voice that whispers hope when the world is trying to impose despair. And above all, he is the one who promised to remain with you every day until the end. Philosophy helps us grasp how deep that promise is. If Jesus is the Logos, then he is the meaning that runs through the entire fabric of life. If he is the light, then no shadow can fully dominate. If he is the way, then even uncertain steps have direction. If he is the truth, then fear cannot rule as the author of your story. And if he is the life, then every one of your breaths finds purpose in the simple reality that there is a God who chose to walk beside you. This presence is not just a theological idea. It is deeply emotional, profoundly human, and powerfully transformative. It restores what fear has fractured, softens what anxiety has hardened, and heals what silence has wounded. And so, as this script comes to a close, a door opens inside you, a door to a new way of living, where fear may still knock but no longer rules the house, where insecurity may try to enter but finds no place to stay, where night may fall, but the light within you never fully goes out. That door swings open every time you whisper, "Jesus, stay," with a surrendered heart, an open soul, and a faith that may be small, but is still burning, because he stays, he sustains, he leads. Before we finish, let this truth sink deeply into your spirit. You never walk alone. There is an eternal presence walking beside you, holding your hand, enlightening your mind, and warming your heart. Jesus stays when everyone else leaves. He continues when everything seems to stop. He visits when your soul collapses. He restores when hope runs low. And he looks at you with a loving certainty that your life has value, purpose, and direction. May you walk your journey with this phrase engraved in your heart, soft, deep, and eternal. Jesus, stay.